Sonic X Comic Issue 27. We start out in a continuation of the previous story for a change, with Eggman greeting the United Nations representatives at a wrestling match he'll perform at. Because United Nations representatives go to wrestling matches together. Doesn't everyone know that? By the way, I'm gonna take a wild guess and assume that Eggman's wrestling name in English is translated to the Great Fat Man. Because grand looks like grand. Grand in French can mean great or tall. And Gordo is some big enemy in Kirby. I think there was a Brawl in the Family strip where Kirby ate something and became larger and said he was Gordo as a joke. So that's probably what his stage name means. And he doesn't need to know Spanish, per se. He just needs to Google Translate whatever he needs to know. So that's not a big problem. It just seems weird to me that nobody's recognizing his voice, when that's combined with him clearly having the Eggman mustache. He challenges his gold robot dressed in a disguise to a fight, and somehow he's actually learning that this is his robot in disguise for the first time. Good writing would have it the way I assumed it would be, and have Eggman know it's him and have arranged for him to fight him for an easy victory. Even when reading the script I assumed that. Eggman assumes that he's gotten jealous of him and wants to challenge him. This would be interesting, but the problem is that the gold robot talks as if Eggman came to the wrong conclusion. On the bright side, the maid doesn't get fooled by the grey robot's disguise and slams the door in his face when he asks to interview Sonic. So, he's Boko? Surprisingly, he tries over and over again in different disguises, and when he dressed up like a Girl Scout, actually smiled a lot and almost giggled. I wasn't expecting that many disguises in a row, and especially not for him to disguise himself as a girl. I'm willing to give the comic the benefit of the doubt and assume that every time he shows up in another disguise, there's a long period of time passed where he ran away from the house, went all the way to wherever he'll keep his disguise, like maybe at the egg carrier, or best case scenario, it's in the bushes right next to her door. But then he went all the way back here, every single time. But still, why the fuck does he have these disguises? He didn't know she would turn him down, did she? At least AOSCH Sonic, I can pretend that with his super speed, he had the time to run to wherever he wanted to get the disguise from somewhere in seconds. But how did this robot get access to a Girl Scout's outfit? Did Eggman seriously get him all these disguises himself? Anyways, Boko shows decency for a change by saying that he wants to warn Sonic that the leaders of the world are in danger. That's out of character. I mean, if Eggman was stupid enough to give him and Deco free will, and make robots that would be opposed to him, it's nice to see this result from it. But why are they going to continue to work for him for the rest of the comic because status quo, if at least one of them knows he's evil? It'd be great if they explained that these guys are staying with Eggman because they do more harm to him than good, so they'd be double agents. That would justify it. Anyways, the maid Ella has a sweet moment because she lets him into the house with a smile, saying that all he had to do was tell her the truth. And Boko amuses me by saying, "Blasted human morals. Who can resist thin mints?" Sonic then amuses me by having a friendly smile and staying on the couch as if he's greeting an old friend. He snarks at him saying, "Nice dress." Then I'm expected to believe that Sonic actually buys that Eggman gave up the evil villain thing. Are you serious? I assumed that Eggman would only be doing this wrestling thing as a hobby, and would continue to try to take over the world on the side. At no point did I ever assume that he would stop being a villain entirely. It does add depth and a sympathetic side to him if it is true, because then that means that what he wanted all along was for people to adore him, and that's what he gets out of being a wrestler. He gets them to genuinely like him, and without the paperwork of ruling the world, without all that boring micromanagement. So of course this won't last. I guess it would be lame if Eggman retired for good and just stayed as a wrestler. Then he wouldn't be doing his plans anymore, and who would? Though it would be great if we got to see the future, and that was what Eggman was doing from then on. Boko says it's not Eggman he's worried about. The door slammed to trap people in the wrestling match, and the one who did it was Emperor Bokkun. I love that he's still showing off his childlike personality, because he says a whole bunch of words before finally saying his name, blissfully unaware that people might find it tedious to wait through all those words. Deco says it's too late and he's here, implying that he was just trying to warn Eggman about him. So why the fuck didn't he just say that in the first place? And Eggman says that Bokkun's doing it wrong, and he opens up with a crushing show force. I guess I can't really blame Bokkun because not only is he in a sugar high, but he was raised by Eggman. So he genuinely has no way of knowing on his own that what Eggman's doing is wrong and why. He was raised to think that wanting to take over the world is cool, and he doesn't know any better. Bokkun then makes me have the biggest smile on my face and even giggle a little when he says that effective immediately, all citizens are to go into the manufacturing of sweets. So not only is it creative, but he's still being in character. Plus we get to see what Chip would be like as a villain. Honestly, I think I'd like him a lot better that way. It'd be a brilliant subversion because he'd look and sound harmless, but that'd all be a mask to hide how evilly selfish and hedonistic he really is. And him being hedonistic about food would be foreshadowing to the eventual plot twists where he'd be a bad guy. I'd love to see an evil Chip. Of course, Bokkun really does show his naivety here, because, interestingly enough, he hasn't thought this through at all. As you would expect for a child robot. You can't have everyone be a sweets manufacturer. The world needs doctors to tend to the sick, and engineers and architects to construct stuff, and electricity plant workers to keep electricity going. And that's the real menacing thing about his plan. The world will collapse without all those jobs being filled. He's not saying that he plans to fill them with robots. And if Bokkun saw sick people and injured people, would he be capable of understanding what he should do, even on a pragmatic level? Or would he just get rid of them until eventually there'd be no one left? Would he realize that some jobs are necessary, or would he genuinely not pay any attention to how the world and its people are suffering, and just blissfully eat candy all day? If he has the mind of a little kid, which I guess Eggman only gave to a robot of his for the science, and maybe he wanted a kid himself, then sorry to say, but yeah, that's probably how he'd be. But on the bright side, if he's not paying attention to anything and just eating sugary food all the time, then wouldn't people be able to disobey his rules anyways because he wouldn't be forcing them? As long as they keep him fed, he'd just stay in his room eating all the time. He wouldn't be interested in paperwork micromanagement. Maybe he'd actually assign that job to somebody else. Oh god, what if Bokkun and Deco were given the real power? That would suck. There's no way he'd do the actual running. He wouldn't care about it. This really goes to show what a fantastic idea it would be to have Bokkun be just as much of a genuine threatening major villain as Eggman, if not even more so. He looks the part, he has a proper excuse for being a villain, and he has a unique gimmick, which is much more than can be said for Eggman, who's just generic mad scientist that wants to take over the world. This looks to be another genius Grounder situation, where the dumb robot sidekick becomes a huge threat, and I want him to be that way for the whole show. This threatening position of Bokkun goes so well with him that it sparks my imagination right away, made me go on for paragraphs about how he'd be like as a ruler of the world. I can even picture it now. The people working in sugar mines and sugar factories under a red sky with giant balloons and blimps of Bokkun's head flying around. And there could be shadow swap-bots patrolling the streets to keep the order since Bokkun wouldn't bother to do it. And Eggman would be trapped in a cage. I'd love to see that as an alternate reality version of Mobius. It's sad that the idea behind this that's never gonna get fully carried out and realized is so much better than the actual story and what's gonna happen in it, because, well, the story is cool, but your imagination, it just goes wild, and what you imagine is so much cooler than, but you never actually get to see it. So, he works really well as the one who looks cute and unthreatening, and could turn out to be a lot worse than you'd expect. So I'm not looking forward to the issue anticlimatically foiling him in utter humiliation in 2 seconds in just one issue without letting him go anywhere with the idea. Not being remotely a threat at all after trapping everyone in a room. All because Sonic's the overpowered creator's pet. He tells the president that Halloween will now be every Saturday, which would be very expensive for people if they're forced to buy all that candy every Saturday. Does he actually go trick-or-treating himself? I'd like to see that. And cavities can no longer be allowed to exist. Has he gotten any? Has he ever gone to the dentist? What, does Eggman serve as his dentist? He probably grumbles miserably about it. This makes sense because, you know, he's grown up around advanced technology. He lives with Eggman. Why the hell wouldn't he think that there could be a cure for cavities? Then Bokkun says that the concept of fun-sized will be rewritten, saying, "It's almost flawed beyond repair. How could such tiny portions of candy be fun?" I can really relate to the amount of passion and frustration he has over something completely minor and insignificant that he cares about because it's his area of interest. I just wish he wasn't wearing that stupid fake facial hair. Everything else is great. Although, it's definitely good to change his design to really make it impactful that he's a big threat now. So maybe it's not so bad to have that mustache. I then have the biggest smile on my face because he punctuates that nitpicky complaint of his by giant robots breaking the roof above them while he says, "This is what fun size should be." He reminds me of a Dark Chow with a smile. And not only that, but this feels like what modern Eggman would be if he was taken seriously while still being entertaining like he should be. He's a threat, but he's also entertaining and fun at the same time. He's joking around, but dark humor. Eggman says no 3 times. Again, not just because he's betraying him, but instead because he thinks Bokkun is doing it wrong. This is why I have no respect for this kind of Eggman. Now, why would he think he's doing it wrong? He's doing everything perfectly. He says that the wanton destruction of property comes after the show of resistance. No, it doesn't. Why would he think these rules exist? When he never took over the world, so they never worked out for him. Didn't he nag him about not showing a display of force? Well, that's the display of force. Perfect timing. I guess Eggman doesn't take him seriously as a traitor since that's all he's complaining about. Maybe he thinks that Bokkun will keep him around. Which he would, if only to have someone to make his robots and do the actual running of the world. And if that was explained, then that would make Bokkun look even more threatening, because he's not going to run the world, Eggman is. I wish Eggman made that clear, that he realizes Bokkun's only in it for sweets, which he gets anyways. So he's only doing the whole Emperor thing because he's been raised to think it's cool. He's not trying to be evil, he's trying to be cool. And he's a kid who doesn't know any better. In fact, how long has he actually been around? How recently was he built? Is he really like 1 year old? I can't hate him because I understand that he doesn't know any better and he's just being an entitled little kid. And at the same time, he's being a threatening villain. Because I'm kind of rooting for Sonic to beat him here, in a way that's satisfying, and not insanely easy. I can easily understand why the bystanders in the crowd, like normal people, would be terrified of him. I like that Sonic says he didn't know the little guy had it in him, and says, "Let's go, Bokkun," and drags him along with them. Bokkun asks, "Why do you need me? What can I do?" He's impressively self-aware of how he's not super useful, and surprisingly humble of robot Eggmans. So far I'm really enjoying the story, so I bet the ending will be really disappointing, because this is too good to be true. Sonic tells Bokkun to make sure Eggman's out of the way while he'll handle the robots. One of which grabs the president because the robots were told to grab the leaders of the world. Again, Bokkun wouldn't want to run the world. He'd be bored in seconds. So logically this would only be temporary. The leaders could make a compromise with him and give him everything that's realistically feasible. So it wouldn't necessarily have him running the world. Or maybe he'd have other robots run the world. Eggman actually saves the president, smacking the giant robot claw with his belly. The president says that Bokkun's worse than Eggman somehow, and Eggman says that Eggman's a mad genius and he'd be honored to fight him. I'll give the comic the benefit of the doubt here and say that this wouldn't instantly give the game away. The president just thinks that he respects Eggman as an antagonist. So do some Sonic fans. I really have to wonder how Bokkun took control of those giant robots though. Since when does he know how to reprogram robots to obey him? Well, I guess they obey him because they think that he's doing Eggman's work, since he is one of Eggman's robots after all. He smirks at Eggman and says that his defeat will be slow and delicious, still going with his obsession with food to remind us that he at least has more character than a generic villain does. And his obsession with food makes sense if you think about it, because since when can robots eat? He can. And that makes him feel special. He really enjoys being able to eat, and with his childlike mind, he goes overboard with it. Whereas with Chip, his obsession with food felt like it was just a lazy, one-dimensional personality because he's trying to be a comedy character. And then the like Gaia thing was thought up at the last minute to force him to be relevant. It works better here because Bokkun's on the bad guy's side. Bad guys don't tend to have personalities in Sonic. And I think it's more generic for big eaters to be neutral or good than on the bad guy's side. It was nice of Bokkun to call Eggman by his wrestler name instead of revealing who he was right away. But that didn't make any sense since he's against them. I wish they made it more clear that the reason he wants revenge on Eggman is because he's a bad boss and he's had it coming for a really long time. So all of this resentment's been festering in him until he couldn't hide it anymore. Remember when he was painted green and Eggman scared him by telling his robots to go after him? He told the heroes that Eggman went crazy and he threw some bombs at his robots. That could have been retroactive foreshadowing. I like to think that this was the tipping point for him that he's thinking of when he wants revenge. I'm sure that the intended catalyst was just that he's had too much sugar though, because we had that clumsy foreshadowing earlier that he was eating too much sugar and it'll fry his brain. The problem with that is that he eats sugary food all the time, like almost every time he shows up. So why is it that only now he's turning on Eggman completely? Then he tells the fun sizors, I love that robot name by the way, to squeeze the strudel out of the oven-baked pastry. He's like Fawful, but way better, because Fawful isn't a little kid. Technically he's a robot organic guy, but he's like a kid. Of course, the minute he threatens Eggman with giant robots that he couldn't possibly hope to beat on his own, rather than the realistic thing happening and Eggman being killed right there, Sonic has to run around them in a blur to save the day, because fine, otherwise Eggman could be killed. Or again, maybe he just capture him and he's just trying to be dramatic. I like that Bokkun looks really nervous, with sad eyes and the anime sweat drop when he realizes things have gone wrong, if only in the sense that it makes him look sympathetic. And it's another thing that emphasizes his childlike personality because he's genuinely scared of Sonic. It's sad that this might be the time when I'm the most interested in Bokkun, and the writing's not going to have the guts to make this act like an actual comic book and have him stay a major villain for the rest of the comic book, because it has to be tied down to being canon with the anime. Sonic jumps around on the giant robots and makes them punch each other. This is always a clever way of him to win. It makes sense that he could get away with this with his super speed, and it's much better than him simply flying around them in a blue blur and destroying them that way in a total Deus Ex Machina, where you wonder how he can fly because he doesn't even have a ring on hand. Where's Tails, by the way? Anyways, Sonic says charmingly that he's late because he had to drop off Bokkun. Again, talking about him as if he's his friend. When Eggman challenges Bokkun in the ring, which would make sense since Bokkun's smaller than him, somehow Bokkun wins because he grabs his red cape, moving it all over the place, and punches him from below, hitting him in the absolute weak spot while giggling like a little schoolgirl. Can he be a major villain on par with Eggman for the rest of the comic? I guess not. I guess we have to have it be just one blam issue. This is feeling like a very epic and engaging story so far, introducing Bokkun as a new threatening villain who actually has an excuse and a unique motive and gimmick when Eggman doesn't. And it'll only be one issue! Also, I forget, are there still those nanites that would keep people pinned to the floor with the magnet? Or did Eggman get rid of that? Because otherwise, how does it decide who to... Wouldn't it make Bokkun lose? The robots tell Eggman that he can't win this as El Gran Gordo. They need a mad scientist instead. He takes off his disguise, and the robot lampshading how fast he changed out of his outfit is amusing, but doesn't justify it properly. But it had to happen in one panel for the sake of being dramatic. Sonic says he'll keep Bokkun busy, while Eggman comes up with a plan. Bokkun has my sympathy because he acts like Sonic is a genuine childhood fear of his, like the boogeyman. And can you blame him? Maybe he genuinely thinks that Sonic's evil. Maybe because he keeps Eggman from taking over the world and he doesn't know any better. Sonic taunts him that his whiskers need a shave, trying to spin dash at him. He grabs his red cape and lampshades that he's saying he misses Eggman, and Bokkun seems to start crying, saying that Sonic's like a cough drop. He looks like sweet, tasty goodness on the outside, but he's vile within. Which makes sense since Sonic destroys robots a lot, and he's a robot. I don't like that he said vile wholesomeness though. That's too cartoonish and stupid. It doesn't make any sense at all. How is what Sonic's doing wholesome from Bokkun's point of view? Bokkun just sees Sonic as a bully here who's ruined his plan and humiliated him in front of all those people that he was just intimidating earlier. Oh good, he giggles and wraps Sonic around with his cape, getting the upper hand, finally. He says Sonic's not so tough, as if he's trying to stand up to a bully he's been afraid of and is lying to himself to stop being scared. He calls himself the Emperor of many adjectives, as well as the King of Cotton Candy and Sultan of Sundays. Amusing dialogue once again. A lot of people like Bean when Flynn writes them. I like this guy way more. Not only is he a wacky guy who throws bombs, but while he's obviously a little kid, which Bean shouldn't have been, there's a lot of emphasis on the childlike mindset he has, while Bean's age is ambiguous. And he's only obsessed with bombs, not anything else. This guy is probably pretty new to the world, so being obsessed with food that everyone takes for granted makes sense. And he has a kind of devilish appearance. It's a contrast. Unfortunately, Sonic smirks in the next panel and scares Bokkun because he's confident regardless. And because bullshit, Sonic somehow manages to crawl into a spin dash in a bullshit Deus Ex Machina and break free of the cape that should be restraining him. He throws Bokkun to Eggman, Eggman lies on top of him, and eventually Bokkun passes out. Eggman had calculated precisely how long it would take for Bokkun's hyper sugar rush to wear off at the worst possible moment, and he wanted to keep him from embarrassing him further in his last moments. If he's just taking a nap, what's the point of him saying last moments? Eggman says to the crowd that he knows everything, not implying in the slightest that he's gonna miss being adored by the crowd as a hero because he apparently learned nothing from that character development. Instead, he somehow acts all happy and arrogant saying they fell for it, which is completely out of character from how he acted last issue. Was he just manipulating Sonic and that's all? That's boring. Sure, Sonic teased Eggman, implying that Eggman's lying and actually enjoyed his superhero act. But one panel isn't nearly enough. I would have liked it better if Eggman went home and looked sad about all being over. Did Eggman really need to take off his wrestler costume? He could have done calculations in it. This issue is by Ian Flynn, and I think it was my favorite one in the comic, ironically enough. Of course, as I expected, Bokkun was defeated really easily at the end of just one issue where he was a threat. It's a shame because I thoroughly enjoyed seeing him be threatening. I don't know how he managed to make giant robots do something Eggman wouldn't want it to do. I don't know, maybe they're so mindless that they thought he was carrying out Eggman's orders by commanding them. I guess the Sugar Rush explanation makes sense as a catalyst because if he's all hyper on sugar, he'll want a lot more of it. But you think that if he had a hyper sugar rush, he'd just be bouncing off the walls and talking extremely fast. And wouldn't be able to be threatening and come up with a plan like this. What's the correlation? He's been high on sugar before. Multiple times he's had tons of sugar. So that can't be the only reason. I liked seeing his demands to the world leaders and seeing how they were based around his gimmick. He's like an evil version of Chip. And rather than being truly despicable and unforgivable, his evil is the kind where he doesn't know any better because he was raised by Eggman to think he's just being cool. I'm reminded of how the women who raised N in Pokemon Black and White said that N is innocent, and there is nothing more terrifying than innocence. His naivety, if he got his demands, would have serious consequences to the world he wouldn't have thought about, that he probably wouldn't even be aware of because if he did become Emperor, he'd just be content to eat sugary food all day. When Eggman pinned him down, he acted like a bratty little kid demanding chocolate. And when Sonic showed up, he was relatably terrified, showing what's beneath the mask after all that time of acting threatening. I like that he did get to one-up Eggman and Sonic defeated the giant robots in a way that made sense, even if I still can't understand how he got all the way up to the top of them. The victory over him was easy because it all happened in one issue, but it wasn't technically a horrible Deus Ex Machina, aside from breaking out the cape. Now I have to wonder why Eggman won't scrap him after this. He doesn't have the time and patience to have Bokkun supervised enough to keep him from getting that kind of sugar rush again, right? Of course, the explanation would be that he's an idiot, and he's too stubborn and lazy to get rid of a robot helper when he could keep him around. But what does Bokkun do for Eggman in the comic exactly? In the anime, he delivers exploding messages, but that's all I can think of. Someone else could do that. Bokkun really made a big impact in this issue. He has a clear personality, even if not a super deep one. He's entertaining. And unlike Eggman, he has a reason for being who he is and a genuine unique motive with threatening consequences. And I bet this will be the only time he'll be a villain of this scale. All this does is prove that the comic is playing it too safe instead of breaking the status quo more often. Because he should be doing this kind of thing just as much as Eggman is. Not flying around uselessly talking about food. There's a lot of charming dialogue in this story. I loved how Sonic and the maid were nice to Bokkun, and the ultimate punchline of his disguises was amusing enough to be worth their lack of logic. But I hate how Eggman wasn't sad at all about having to, quote-unquote, having to give up his wrestler persona. Character development? What's that? We don't even get to see Chris's reaction to clearly finding out his idol was Eggman, which would have wrapped up a loose plot thread. But no, of course not, never mind.